It's the music. It just
It's
gets us
such good
going in the
music.
morning. Welcome, everybody, to Self-Publishing Insiders. I'm Jim Azevedo, and today I'm so excited to welcome back to the podcast Becca Syme.
Hi.
Hey,
I'm so excited to be here. We had so much fun last time. We're going to have a blast.
we are. I'm so excited to have you back. Um, let me read your bio because your bio is pretty interesting. Let me do that so I can kind of set the stage because Becca was here
Yeah.
about almost a year ago now, and she's welcome back anytime. But for those of you who are new to the show, welcome. I think you're going to really enjoy this conversation. So let me tell you about who Becca is. Becca Syme is a Gallup-Certified Strengths Coach and has individually coached more than 5,000 authors at all levels. I want to underscore that individually coached over 5,000 authors. That means we're not talking about like you had 100 people at a conference that you coach all at once. This is individually more than 5,000 authors. So there's a lot of experience there. Becca is the author of the Quitbooks for Writers series and the popular Write Better Faster course, and the host of the Quitcast for Writers podcast and YouTube channel. She also writes mystery novels and lives on one of the 1,000 lakes in Minnesota. Welcome back to the show, Becca.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. I always forget too, we forgot to change that. It should be 10,000 lakes. You can tell I didn't grow up here
Oh,
because I missed that, but 1,000 is a lot.
it's up. That's very watery. So we get
Yes,
the
so
idea.
watery.
I thought you were going to say that you coach 10,000 authors, and I was going to be
Oh,
like, what?
so I am closer to 10,000 individual people now. Like I'm at over 6,000 individual authors because I think that bio was from about 3 years ago.
Yeah, I
But
thought you were over 6,000.
yeah, I'm over 6,000 individual, and then I'm close to 10,000. Not quite because I just didn't have the volume of people before
Mm-hmm.
authors, but close. I get a little obsessed about stuff when I really, really get excited about something. And I used to coach people everywhere I could find them. I would coach them in the grocery store, on the plane, in the library, like in line at Starbucks. Anywhere I could be, I'd be like, "Oh, let's talk about this. I heard that thing." So I love it.
Really?
It's fun for me.
Like random people or people that you
Oh
already
yeah,
had as clients?
yeah. In
Really?
fact, I was telling somebody, one of my clients
I need to
today.
visualize this a little bit before we get into the meat. So how do you walk up to like a random person to start
Oh,
coaching
no,
them?
it was never walking up. It was always I would overhear something. So either
Okay.
this, and it used to happen so much more on planes 10 years ago, where you just pick up random conversations with people. And a lot of it was because I traveled so much, I would sit next to people on the plane and they would tell me stuff. And I'd be like, "Oh,
Yeah.
is your spouse doing," because they tell me something. And I'd be like, "Do they do this, this, and this?" And they'd be like, "Yeah, how did you know?" And I'm like, "Because you're probably this, and you probably ended up with someone who's not. So here's how you fix that." Right. And I don't
Uh,
know that I would say I count people that I talk to for 10 minutes, right? Like I wouldn't count
yeah.
that in my number, but if I had their strengths in front of me and I had the ability to coach them about the strengths themselves, but that's how I got into it originally, was just I would just obsessively talk to anybody who I knew had a problem. And I'm like, "You don't understand how predictable these things are. Everybody and personality tests get a bad rap because people try to use them to explain everything, and they can't
Hmm.
explain everything about you. And no one test explains everything. Everything is there's a complexity to human beings. But if you can understand where the underlying behavior motivation is coming from, and these talent clusters are so
Hmm.
predictable, it's like I can tell you, if you're high empathy, don't do this and this because it's going to make your life hard. And every high empathy person does that. And we all need to just let empathy people alone. You know what I mean? Like
Yep.
not throw all the things on them.
I'm
But
laughing because that's
because you're
was my.
number one empathy. Yeah.
But
But
before we go down
yeah,
those paths, let's kind of set that foundation a little bit to tell so people
yeah,
understand what we're talking about when it comes to these different personality traits.
yeah.
Um, can you give us some background on the Better
Mhm.
Faster Academy, and then what Quitbooks is all about? And we'll kind of talk about the coaching specifically, and the and the clip and the gosh, I forgot the name of it. Clifford Strengths.
Clifton Strengths. Yep.
Clifton Strengths, and how that works.
Yeah, the core of the Better Faster Academy is this understanding that how people are different matters a lot to how they're successful. So what I think a lot of us would like, because it would be easier, would be if there was just one way to be successful and then you could just make yourself into that thing. So if it is like waking up early in the morning or whatever it is that you think you're supposed to be doing, then you could just force yourself to do this thing that would make everyone successful. And then by doing that, you would ensure that you would have success. What we actually found, not just like me personally, but as the Clifton Strengths was being created, is that the differences between humans are so consistent and predictable that those differences have success patterns in them. So, like when I'm a number one empathy, there are certain ways that I'm going to be the most successful as a number one empathy. And empathy is a trait cluster, right? Where all these different behaviors that have empathy in common, you do all of those things. And everyone who has empathy does that trait cluster with excellence when they have empathy high because of how they constructed the test. So when you know you have these strong behaviors that have been studied for decades and decades, and you know that this is a consistent thing about you, then you treat yourself as though you are this way instead of trying to conform to something that isn't. Not only is it not promised that it will actually work that way for you, because you have to be wired in that way in order for it to work. And really, that's kind of the core of Better Faster Academy, is that you can't act against your wiring, no matter how much we want to, because it's so strong. So we might as well understand it and then work with it, and then get the better faster is that you get exponentially better when you are acting in areas with natural talent instead of trying to
Okay.
fix weaknesses all the time, right?
That's so interesting. And it gives a bit of permission too for those of us who might feel, okay, I'll speak about myself.
Yep.
If I'm feeling like, gosh, I need to be more like an extrovert. I need to go into these networking opportunities and work the room. And oh my gosh, I'm such a loser because I can't do that like that type A person over there or that extrovert over there. They're so witty and they're so outgoing. Gosh, if I was only like that. So what I'm hearing from you is that you're not like that exactly, but you're like this. And
Yep.
here are the traits that you can put to work for you to use the strengths that you already have. Oh, by the
Yep.
way, you do have strengths. Everybody's got some strengths. And here's how
Yep.
you use them.
Yeah, like that extreme extroversion trait, let's say the wittiness, the charisma, that kind of thing, they're not good at certain things. So like something that they are not great at, you're great at. So understanding what I'm great at and what someone else is
Mhm.
great at is super important. And I use this example a lot because there are certain traits that we've kind of been conditioned to believe are opposites, but that are really on a sort of continuum, right? Like I might think of myself as an introvert, but on a continuum of introvert to extrovert that's actually gradiated, I might actually be closer to the middle. So I may have been expecting myself to act in a certain way, but I'm not an extreme. So then if I try to treat myself as though I'm an extreme, and I teach myself the skills that the people who are excellent at that extreme are doing, I may actually not get any closer to being excellent at that thing because I just don't have that capacity. Whereas if I will teach myself to do the things that people who are more excellent at what I'm good at will do, then I can become more and more. Again, that's the better, faster area, right? Where I want
Mhm.
to become better rather than constantly trying to fix my weaknesses in a way that makes me feel like I'm not making any progress because I'm not getting any closer to that extroversion, right?
I'm already feeling better about myself.
Yeah,
We've been in this conversation, what, less than
good.
5 minutes?
We need everyone. And this is the other piece that I think is really, really important. Everybody's difference serves a purpose that is a larger purpose. And it isn't like some of us are meant for stardom and some of us aren't. That's not what I mean. I mean, we need to see all versions of stardom out there. So I need to see the introverted, sort of, let's say, like Sarah J. Maas style of author who just doesn't want to be on social media, doesn't want to be around people, but is extremely talented at being a writer. I need to see if I'm wired that way, that she exists and that people like her exist. So if I'm wired that way, I'm not trying to make myself into an Instagram influencer because I am not wired to be successful in that way. I may be wired to be successful by cloistering and hiding and what we would call, from an archetype perspective, wardrobing, where I just go into the wardrobe and disappear in there. And then I come out with a finished product, but I'm not out there all of the time trying to sell my books to everybody and act like this extroverted person, because that's not me. So it's important to know that those other success archetypes actually exist, so that you don't have to feel like, well, I feel like I just want to hide all the time. But everybody says, and every single time we hear the phrase, everybody says, you absolutely need to just question the premise of it, because there is no such thing as something everyone should be doing. It is not possible that that's true.
I love that. Let me bring up a quick comment here from Beth Irwin. Hi, Beth, and thank you for your comment. Beth says, Becca is a career changer because she drills down on your particular challenge of strengths and teaches you how to be a better you.
Yeah.
With that comment, like, what brought you into coaching in the first place?
Yeah, it's interesting because that's exactly what was missing for me. I grew up with people who were very similar to each other in my family of origin in terms of like how they were motivated and how they were their best self, right? So when I was trying to be like that, it was just killing me. I felt unsuccessful. I felt like I was never going to amount to anything. Like literally, I run a 7-figure business. At 18, my parents were not sure I would be able to function on my own outside the house and like fully have my own like house and pay my own rent and etc. But it was because I was so just bogged down with these expectations of trying to be like other people and trying to be successful and excellent in the ways other people were. And I had this coaching session, and I went to grad school, and they required us to take the strengths test as an entrance. And then I got coached for an hour after we took the assessment with a certified coach, and changed my whole life. Like I walked out of that because basically he told me, all these things that you've been holding yourself accountable for, like those are your parents' strengths. That's how they're successful. These are not strong for you. Like, and he would say things like, I can hear this in you, right? Like you do not have that trait. That's their trait. That's probably in your bottom 5. Sure enough, it's my number 32 strength, discipline. That's just not for me. Both of my parents are the most, my mom has worked out at every single day of her adult life. She works out on vacation. She works out like literally every single day of except the day she had surgery, right? Like maybe she skipped a day.
Slacker.
Slacker. I'm not that person. I can't be that person. So me trying to motivate myself in the way that is that expectation, I will always feel like a failure every time. So my goal, I think, after I had that experience was like, I need everybody to understand this is not intuitive for people to understand. We are wired biologically to try to copy what other people are doing to be successful, but we're copying the wrong people. We need to understand how to listen for our strengths and copy people who are like us.
Gosh, this is so interesting. We were talking backstage about, I was telling you how I'm such a big proponent of coaching across multiple disciplines, whether it's athletics or creativity or business, career advice, all of that stuff. Why do you feel that coaching is so effective for the creative community and writers in
Yeah.
particular?
So there's 2 reasons. One is you don't know what's going on inside your brain. Like you don't know. And you're only in charge of 5% of your decisions. like consciously in charge. Everybody thinks like I'm in charge of all my choices. You are in charge of 5% statistically of your decisions in a day. 95% of your decisions are being made by systems you don't even understand, let alone have access to. And this is exactly what, like, just to use an athletics equivalent, I grew up in an athletics family. I have Division 1 athletes, you know what I mean, in my family. So athletics makes a lot of sense to me. When you have a coach, the coach is above the game. Like the coach is not in the game with you. They are on the sidelines. You're doing all the high stake stuff. You're having all of the execution, etc. But the coach knows why you're doing what you're doing. The coach knows the fundamentals of your behavior. And the coach is there to give you the perspective that you cannot have when you are inside the game. And the problem is, and if any of you ever played a game like basketball, football, like something where you're actually surrounded by a lot of stimulus and there's a lot of kind of things going on that can draw your attention, you can't see the field. Even the quarterback with field vision can't see the entire field. It's the coach's job to understand the context of the game that you're playing, to know all the rules, to know your behavior, and to know you well enough to say, hey, let's come out of that. Like you're getting too focused on this person that's coming at you. Look up, like look at the horizon instead of looking at that tackler. This is your O-line is not doing their job. We've got to get this person to come other here, right? Like for me, the understanding of what coaching provides for you is why it's so important. I don't care who coaches you. It could be us, it could be Claire, it could be anybody. I don't care who does it. But everyone needs a coach of some kind, and not just a mentor. Mentors are
I was
often
just about to ask you that. Does that include mentors?
so different. Mentors are so interested in you doing the thing that they did. Like true mentors, you go to someone because they've had a huge amount of success in your field and you're trying to understand how they did it, and they're giving you the benefit of their experiences. Coaches understand the game that you are playing, and they understand the fundamentals of the game you're playing and how you progress. So a really good coach is as much a developer, like a developmental sort of maximization specialist, as much as they are anything. They are way less interested in the exact mechanics of what other successful people do, because it doesn't matter. And again, to use a sports metaphor, like Michael Jordan and LeBron James don't play the same game. You don't coach them the same. They're not the same player. You don't coach Kobe Bryant the same way you coach Caitlin Clark. They're not the same. Well, that's a bad example because I think they do actually have the same number one strength, but you don't coach them the same way because they're not the same player. They're not playing the same game. They're not on the same team, right? Like they're not the same position. So like you don't coach those people the same, because I'm not coaching a system. And that's the difference, right? Is like, I'm not coaching you in my system of how to become a 6-figure author. So it's a huge difference. I don't care the steps that you take to get where you need to go. I care who you are. I care what you don't know about yourself, because that is the most important thing of all. When there's something about you that's going to consistently happen and you don't understand it, I need to bring understanding to you so you know how to control that thing that you're doing, right? So a coach is a specialist in being able to have perspective on you and the game that you're playing, and everybody needs that. I have more than one coach. Like I have specific coaches for specific things, because I know that there's a lot of stuff I don't know, and I need to be able to have more perspective, because again, when I'm in the play and I see that the player coming at me, I can't get out of my head in that situation. I need somebody, right? Like I need
especially when
somebody.
you're playing the game and it's
Oh
been
my
working
God.
for you already. It's been working for you.
Yep.
It's been working for you. But then how do I excel? How do I break out of, where I am
Yep.
today to get to that next level tomorrow? Because what I'm doing is working. So I guess I don't need a coach really.
Right.
But then when you
Right.
get it, you're just like, it's so eye opening. Everything you're saying is just like, oh,
Yep.
it's really just opening doors. right now for
Yes.
me. I
Yep.
hope everybody else is feeling the same way.
It's huge. But this is also why CEOs, almost all CEOs have multiple coaches.
I
When
believe
you
it.
look at people who are really successful, it's a rare person you're going to find. Like if you watch a podcast interview like Diary of a
Mhm.
CEO or something like that, right?
Mhm.
You're not going to see a lot of people on that show who aren't getting multiple different perspectives from multiple different people, because they know that what they don't know is always going to be their Achilles heel. It's their blind spot, right? So, yeah, that's huge, huge, huge.
You gave the perfect segue a couple of moments ago, and then I asked you a separate question and then kind of
That's
ruined that
okay.
segue. But you started to talk about how you wouldn't coach, like Kobe Bryant the same way that you would coach Michael Jordan.
Yep.
But I wanted to ask you, when it comes to different authors and where they are in their career, can we talk a little bit about different scenarios in that respect,
Yep.
and how coaching may be able to help different authors at different levels of their career?
Yep.
Specifically, what I'm thinking about is aspiring authors who maybe haven't published their first book. Maybe they finished a manuscript or two, but they haven't published yet. And then the newer authors who might have a couple of books under their belt, but they're looking to grow their careers. And then we've got established authors who maybe at this point they've been able to quit their day jobs, they're earning a living, but they want to get to that next level, which is the higher end authors who are, they've gotten to that point where they're reaching maybe 6 and 7 figures. But those high end authors, they're just extremely time limited.
Yeah.
Can we talk about that?
Yeah.
That was a lot. That was a mouthful.
Yeah. So let me just deal with those three different places first, because I will
Okay.
also say how I would coach each individual person who came to me at each one of those levels would be
Got it.
different. But there's for sure some patterns that I see in those three different areas. The biggest thing I see with aspiring authors, especially people who either haven't yet published or who are still in querying, is that they get so focused on the first or the one that they're not able to kind of see the big picture. And so I have a couple of things I consistently say to people who are earlier in their career. One is, and I think this is the biggest mindset shift that earlier in the career authors need to go through, is I have a 7-figure client who said this to me once, and I repeat this all the time. In fact, I just put this on Threads literally today. It was, if I knew how many 1-star reviews it would take me to hit $1 million, I would have wanted them to come so much faster than I did. Because her whole thing was, I was trying to keep the pain at bay of like seeing the 1-star reviews. And I didn't realize that not only are 1-stars necessary, but they are good for you. Like 1-star reviews mean that you're being widely read. And so many people who are looking for the right way for things to happen, we have this. And again, this is the perspective that only somebody with experience can bring you, right? Is when you are, let's say, too focused on the tackler, where the 1-star review is the tackler, you don't realize, no, you want to take that hit because we've got a bigger play happening down the field.
Yeah.
Like, it's okay for you to take a sack once in a while, Drew. It's fine, right? Like that kind of thing, because that's just what has to happen if we're going to get the game that we want to get down the road. But we get too focused on one play. And so often with newer or younger in their career authors, that's my talk, is like, we've got to have a bigger field vision about the way that this happens, and trust that there's nothing that can happen to you you cannot recover from. There's nothing in this industry, no failure, no bad release, no 1-star review, no nothing that can happen to you that you don't have agency to recover from. It's just not possible. So like that's kind of the, earlier in the career. The mid-career authors often struggle, if they haven't hit yet, which we're assuming, right? They often struggle with feeling like every single failure that they have is predictive of future failure. So they don't understand that the first phase of business is the research and development phase. We have a little bit of content on the 5 phases of an author business on the Quitcast and the Patreon, but the first phase is research and development. Every single business, no matter what arena they're in, goes through research and development. For authors, R&D can sometimes take 20 years, right? So we have this feeling that like, if I don't take off in a year, or if I don't take off with my first book, or if I don't take off within 2 series, that I'm never going to be able to make money. And we don't understand that the purpose of the research and development phase, the early phase in your career, is literally to teach yourself how to find the demand for the books that you are writing or the books that you want to write. So you have to learn how to find the demand. You don't need to have it at any point in the research and development phase until you get to the end, right? Like of phase 1. Then when you found the demand, it will take care of itself, you getting out of phase 1. But if you can't find the demand is the engine that makes the author business grow, right? So you absolutely need to understand that that first phase, you're going to have a lot of frustration. You're going to have a lot of failure. You're not going to take off. You may have to switch series, et cetera, et cetera. If you can't internalize the fact that all of those things are okay and you can still have success in the future, you're really going to struggle when you stay in phase 1 for too long, because it's going
I'm
to
so
feel
glad
like,
you're bringing this up.
mhm, yep,
Because
huge.
that could be a showstopper for a lot of people when they
Yep,
have those first failures. And if you're telling them, hey, based on my years and years and years of experience with coaching authors and other creatives, that not only is failure okay, but it's like expected and you can move
yep,
past that. Because if you don't get past that, you might just throw your hands up and say, I've had enough of this. It
yep,
hurts. It's painful. I don't want to work through it. Because, through our experience of going to conferences and talking to authors, especially newer authors who maybe they decided to self-publish. They wanted to go down that traditional route, and now they're scared to death to self-publish because they are afraid that if they don't find that demand with their first book, then traditional publishers are never going to look at them again.
right. Yep. I would say that for sure is not true, right? Like that. And we need to just we call the reason we say QTP all the time, right? Like we say question the premise, is there are a lot of things that we believe are true because we're playing under a rule set that we don't understand. So
Mhm.
when you play under the rule set of venture capitalism, right, which is what traditional publishing is, it's venture capitalism. It's somebody who has a lot of money paying creative people to take a chance at making even more money, right? So I buy a book from you, you're a creative person, because I want to see if I can make $1 million off of your book. Like that's how venture capitalism works. Because there's such a high number of chances that a
Mhm.
publisher could take, you have to take off quickly, because the rules of venture capitalism are you get one shot at this. And if you don't kill it on your debut, you're not going to get another shot at this,
Yeah.
because there's 1,000 other people who can take that place. The rules change when you have the indie revolution, because now authors can prove to publishers that it takes more than one chance sometimes. So if you miss it on your first chance, you need to remind yourself, I'm not playing under New York rules anymore. This is I'm playing agency rules, right? Where I have the agency to decide if I'm going to keep publishing myself. Am I still learning? Am I still getting better? Do I still think that New York contract might be in front of me sometime? I guarantee you, if you hit the top 100 in the store, 0 publishers are going to go back and look at, can we,
Yeah.
like, did you submit to us at one? You know what I mean? Like, it's just not even important, because your sales are now the proof that they need that whatever you're doing now is working. The problem is pre indie revolution, there wasn't any proof that that could happen. The proof was always in favor of the New York rules publishing, venture capitalist publishing, which was, if you don't take off right away, you'll never take
Yeah.
off. And then they'd use all of these examples as proof. And it's like, right, but you didn't give them a chance. But they can't afford to give chances, because they spend so much money trying to play the game and win so much money. So again, like,
They can't
it's,
afford to take a risk on every
you
author.
can't take a risk on every author, and you really can't afford to develop people's careers unless they can prove that they can sell on some level. So people who have these longer, arcs in their research and development phase, they were really not getting the benefit of that experience. And now we can do that because we are in control of our own careers. And that to me is the best news. Nothing that can happen can take away your ability to have a career that you want at some point in the future. It may not be today, it may not be tomorrow, it may not be next year, but that doesn't matter, because the rules of the game you're playing, and again, this is the field, like, get your head out of the tackle, Drew. It's going to be okay. Look up the field. There's a longer play here. The play is you don't leave the game. You don't check out. You don't tap out. You always understand there could be more in front of you in the future. As long as you have somebody around you who understands the game and reminds you to look at the horizon, you can continue to do this for forever. Yep.
I'm just going to repeat something you said. We have agency. We are in control. Like,
yep.
That was your mic drop moment. Yep. It's so true. How many best-selling indie authors do we all know who are like, yeah, I got rejection after rejection after rejection after rejection, but I just kept on writing. And then I had 10 books under my belt, 15 books under my belt. And then my sales started trickling up for some reason. And then those early adopters, all those early readers of those books began looking for my other books. And then it just started to expand.
It's so important to know the game you're playing. Like, this is why we talk so much about gamification around the BFA, or the Better Faster Academy, because if you don't understand the game you're actually playing, you can think you're playing a different game. And you can think like, I'm playing the game where if I don't sell today, everything is lost. I'm going to, fail forever. I can never get it back. If Amazon takes my rank away for the day of my release, I can never recover from that. It feels so catastrophic, right? But the reality is, if you look at the long game, that's not the game you're playing. That's just a play. And if we don't have that reframe in terms of somebody there to help us remember, you don't have to worry about the play, Drew. You can worry about the field, right? You've got to get your head up. If we don't have that, sometimes we cannot survive. And there are so many people who've had 12, 15, 17, 25-year research and development phases where they've been publishing for long times. And even some people that are like publishing at a very low median level, who had maybe early publishing contracts with New York or something, but were never a breakout. And then all of a sudden they hit the right book at the right time, and then they're making $1 million. And again, this isn't to say it will happen to everyone, but the point is, and this is so important, you don't know that it won't be you. You do not know that. So the only reason you should ever give up is if you don't want to go through the learning curve anymore. And that's reasonable. Like, not everybody wants to go through the learning curve. This is a hard business to be in. It's going to take even more difficulty. It's not going to get any easier. And just to segue into like the high earning authors, right? That's often the conversation I have to have with high earning authors, which is they feel unallowed to talk about their difficulties because they're now making 7 figures, maybe mid 7 figures, maybe 8 figures. It is I'm not allowed to have problems because I'm making so much money, or no one wants to hear about like, oh, this, 7-figure author complaining about how hard their life is, etc. And other people are judging them for having problems. And so a lot of them come to me feeling like, I don't know why I feel this way. And I'm like, it's because you think you're not allowed to talk about the things that bother you. And actually, and this is just being objective, the pressure of the problems that you have at high 6 figures and 7 figures and bigger are often so much more stressful than the pressure that you were having at lower levels, that people don't stay. They don't stay in that area because it's just so much pain up there, and it's so much responsibility, and there's so much danger, and nobody understands that because those people generally aren't allowed to complain about things or talk about what's difficult. And so then a lot of us think all my problems will be solved if I can just get to 7 or 6 figures. And it's like, oh, then they just begin. Like, the problems just begin.
Yeah, because you're not going to stop working, and then that workload, that pressure leads to anxiety,
different pressure,
other health issues.
Yep.
Okay.
Yep.
I knew that the time was going to fly by, so I want to make sure I get to
Sure,
some
yeah, go
comments,
ahead.
questions. Gosh, but this is fantastic. I'm having so much fun.
Yeah, me too. I
Um,
love doing this stuff.
a question from Beth Bliss. Beth asks, "Does Becca have recommendations for an order to watch her videos in? Can we start anywhere?"
Yeah, so I would watch them topically. So we have a whole bunch of topical um lists on the YouTube channel in terms of like if you're in burnout, watch the burnout videos. If you're
Mm,
having writer's block, watch those, etc. Like I would start topically first, and if not topically, if you're not having a specific issue, I would probably start with videos 1, 2, and 3 on the Quitcast, like 101, 102, and 103. And then go from what is recommended in YouTube in that order, because it's going to basically give you like, here's what most people watch afterwards. But yeah, yeah, great
okay,
question.
good. Here's another one. R.A. Morley says, "I think that the quote, 'If I don't sell today, I'll fail forever,' is a public school trauma, to be honest, because failing any section and chapter of curriculum and not getting a chance to do over and understand set us up to,
Always fall behind. Yeah.
yeah."
So it really depends on the person. And this is super important. Again, going back to the kind of like you can't coach Kobe and Caitlin the same way.
Mhm,
So everybody has a place that their responses come from, like the way that they respond to crisis comes from. And so everyone's going to have a slightly nuanced version of this depending on what their strengths are in other pieces. But we
mhm,
definitely do see public school trauma stuff happening with people who are high in learner, people are high in strategic, like the strategic thinking strengths, because they were so judged based on their intelligence, right? And so
mhm,
their inability to perform something that they couldn't figure out on their own to perform, was like that was a big trauma for them. But it really depends on the individual person. But yeah, absolutely. That there's a lot of coding that we get depending on our strengths from failures that have happened in the past. And then it's really hard to unlearn those things because they have worked for us in the past. So the coping mechanisms that I have around that public school issue
mhm.
has worked for me when I was in school, don't work for me anymore now, but it's hard. So the all coaches are created equal thing is not true. As much as I wish that I
Mhm.
could just say, hey, any coach will do, just like I can't say any therapist will do. There have been more damage done by bad therapists than there ever will
Sure.
be help done by good therapists. And so I would say it's really important when you're looking at coaching and trying to choose a coach to look for what you specifically need. So like understanding, and again, that's why I kind of broke that up, right? When you're in a
Mhm.
younger in your career area, you're more likely to have more coaches that will be helpful for you because your learning curve, you're earlier in the learning curve. So there's a higher number of coaches that will be able to help you. The farther you get in, you really need to find people who are being coached by people, if that makes sense,
Yeah,
right?
it does.
Like there's a reason that CEO coaches tend to coach more CEOs, right? Because they have a higher level of success with the people that they've coached and then they refer. But it really is frustrating to me that not every single person who is a coach is equally good at it. And there are certain things I really suck at coaching in terms of like, I will say no sometimes to coaching when people are asking for certain things because I'll say like that I'm not your person for that. Because there
Mhm.
are areas I can't coach either. So
Well,
yeah,
that's always a mark of a good coach as well, or a good practitioner of
I
any
hope
sort,
so.
when you can be humble enough and
And realistic
admit, like,
enough.
and realistic enough. I don't understand that part. I might not be the best person for you.
Yep.
I wanted to go back to your analogy, your sports analogy, when you're talking about being in the middle of a game and there's all these different players running around. You've got a tackler coming at you, and you're kind of focused here, and you have all these different distractions, but a coach can see everything widely. And I think that's so analogous, and that's such a perfect metaphor for authors who are growing their careers, because especially today, there are just so many distractions out there, and there's so much noise, and there's so many service providers, and there's also a lot of best-selling authors who are giving classes and giving their advice and expertise. And I think a lot of times authors are sort of kind of told, no, this is the right way. Like, this is the one true way. This is how it works. This is what you need to do. It's it's this. But then somebody over here says, no, 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 that's bad advice. And so it's so distracting and it's so
Yeah.
frustrating.
Yeah.
So that's why I'm saying it's what you're saying here. It's just making so much sense to me.
Yeah, the more you know about yourself, the more you'll start to recognize the patterns of language that resonate with you and the ones that don't. And the key for me, when what you described in the field, is
Mhm,
I'm scared. When I'm behind the center, if I'm the quarterback and I
mhm.
see the pocket is open and there's somebody coming at me, I start to get scared. So I tense up, I lose connection. Not the good players don't, right? Like the players who've worked themselves out of that space don't.
Yeah.
But like the tendency is to focus on the tackle and to get afraid. And so
Mhm.
anything that we can do, everything that we can do as individual people to cancel out the fears that we have, that we feel, to solve the ones that are actually real, in terms of like, there are some things we should definitely be conscious about, but there are no life and death emergencies in publishing. So when we get into a feeling of like, this is life and death, I can feel myself starting to go into fight or flight. It's
Yeah.
like, okay, nope, the only
Raising my
goal,
hand. That's
yep,
all you mean.
the only goal when I feel that way is to get out of fight or flight. You can't listen to what your brain is telling you in that moment because it's looking at the tackler. It does not know what, it can't afford to focus on anything else. We have to solve the fight or flight
It's self,
problem.
yeah, it's self-preservation. Like, I don't want to.
Self-preservation. Yep. And again, I repeat, and Claire Taylor was the first one to say this, and I think it is worth repeating. There are no life and death emergencies in publishing. So anytime you start to feel like there is, the goal is to get above the line again. So you've gone below the line into your fight or flight response. The goal is to let that feeling pass and then get back into a space where I have connection fully with both my negative and positive emotions. So that's one of the key reminders. If you're in a space where you can only connect with negative emotions, you can't connect with any positive emotions, the goal is time out, get above the line, get regulated,
Mm.
and then don't listen to anything your brain is saying when you're down, when you're below the line in that space, because it is not being logical. It sounds real logical to you in the moment because again, you're in the pocket with the tackle coming at you. So it's going to feel logical to be like tense, protect, tackle, but
Yeah.
the goal is we got to get above the line so we can move, because you can't move when you're below the line. You cannot pivot effectively. You can't, you've lost connection with your logical brain. And so many of us are just living our lives constantly in fight or flight, and we don't realize that that is get out of fight or flight. That is not, you don't solve the problems that you see in fight or flight unless they are actual immediate life and death problems. So actual immediate life and death problems get solved in fight or flight. Everything else in fight or flight is get out of fight or flight. Fight, flight, freeze, fawn, right? Like get out of that
Yeah.
feeling. Because once you can get above the line, you may be able to have field perspective yourself. You may be able to connect with, oh, right. I really do have these plans that I want down the road too, and I can, etc. But when I'm in the moment and I'm so scared, I can't get into that place. And what I'm here to tell you is it is safe to get above the line in the moment. It feels like it's not safe. You're going to want to argue with me. You're going to want to
So
tell
take a
me,
break. It's okay to take a
yep,
break, like
yep,
step
it's
back.
okay to pause, walk away, let yourself get above the line, and then re-engage in the conversation again when you're back above the line. But if we try to make decisions when we're below the line, all we're doing is giving in, giving in, giving in. And by the way, some of you, and I'm going to look in your eyes when I say this,
I'm feeling pointed at right now, but okay.
Some of you, not Jim, because this probably isn't you, but
Well, we'll
some of
see.
you need to get the absolute crack off of social media. You need to get off, because I don't know if you know this, but psychologically, when people are dysregulated, the body's response is to want everyone around us to be dysregulated. So when I
Mm.
get freaked out about something, my goal is to make other people confirm that this is indeed a lion that I'm seeing here, and this is indeed scary. This is indeed life-threatening.
Safety in numbers.
Yep. And so if I can dysregulate everybody else, and again, this is not conscious, nobody knows they're doing this, but biologically, if I can dysregulate everybody else, it confirms that this is indeed a lion and I am indeed correct in being so scared of this. And no one realizes that when we are behind our computers, getting more and more and more dysregulated, that is the opposite of what's helpful for us in that situation. We need to find physical human beings to connect with and get regulated again, because just being behind the keyboard, being dysregulated, is not helping anyone. And in fact, so many of us are so dysregulated by what happens on our computers that we are not conscious enough to be able to get regulated consistently. And it's so, 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 so important to remember, when I'm starting to feel dysregulated, I start to notice I'm tensing, I'm in fight or flight, I'm getting too stressed, I'm getting afraid, whatever it looks like, that I need to break that pattern and disrupt that pattern. So if there is something important for me to pay attention to, I can do it when I'm above the line. This is not the space to do it.
Excellent point. Do you have a couple more minutes, Becca?
Oh, yeah, yeah. Yep, go ahead.
Okay, I know you got to get going soon. I just want to bring up this. Oh, wrong one. This one from Barbara Campbell, who says, Becca convinced me to get off social media. It's one of the best things I've ever done. Even started a new highly successful pen name without social media. That's awesome, Barbara.
I love
That's
hearing that.
amazing. Hey, Becca,
Yeah.
quick question. So when it
Mhm.
comes to like those feelings of being overwhelmed, or those feelings of having imposter syndrome, are
Mhm.
those universal, or are they more, are certain personality traits more susceptible to those
Certain personality
symptoms?
traits are more susceptible. In fact, I have a video, and it should be free actually on our Patreon right now. It's
Mhm.
patreon.com/Becca Syme. And there's a free video on there where I talk about how imposter syndrome, that imposters can't have imposter syndrome. So if you feel like you're an imposter, it's just evidence that you have personality traits that care a lot about being
Mm.
competent and about doing what you're supposed to be doing to do it right. Right. So that is the evidence that you care, is that you will have imposter syndrome. This isn't to say if you don't have imposter syndrome, you don't care. It's to say that the people who are wired in this way in particular are always going to feel that way because of how much they care about belonging and doing it right.
Mm.
So when you, and again, this is the coach perspective, right? It's get your head towards the horizon, understanding that imposter syndrome is not a signal that you are an imposter. It's a signal that you're below the line, because you're listening to your brain. Your brain is lying to you because it's afraid of what's going to happen if you are actually an imposter, but it doesn't know that the presence of the thoughts of imposter syndrome is evidence that you are not one. So we need to just get you back above the line in that moment so you can get back to your competent self and start taking action again. But yeah, those things are some, and just the overwhelm thing really quick, because this is also important. There's a particular strength called intellection in the Clifton strengths, where, and 58% of writers have this, so a lot of us who are listening will have this, where overwhelm is actually a feature, not a bug,
Mm.
where you will take in a whole bunch of information, and overwhelm is the signal that you've taken in enough information. Now, thank you. You need to go think about this stuff that you've just taken in. So rather than us seeing the overwhelm as being a signal of some kind of dysfunction in ourselves, that we're constantly making ourselves feel guilty because we get overwhelmed. Overwhelm is a feature. Like, it
I feel
just
like I have a
means,
constant smile on my face during this
Mhm.
entire interview
Right?
because I'm like, oh, that's me, and that's me, and that's me.
Yeah. And so much of it is just we don't understand what's going on in our brains. And this is why I said earlier, like, I have such a passion for doing this because I feel like so many of us are getting these results over and over and over again that we don't want to have, but we don't know how to fix the problem because we just don't have enough perspective about how our brains really work. So anytime I see these overlapping traits that happen consistently, I try to do a video about it. And I'm like, okay, let's do a video about,
Mhm.
imposter syndrome. Let's do a video
Yeah.
about the bread machine writer. Let's do a video about all these things. And then I try to make them topical so that people can find them, that they'll resonate. But so much of what we think is wrong with us is actually just something that's perfectly right, but it's not what everyone else does. So we may be in like a 18% or a 17% minority of people who think that way, but it's actually perfectly right for that 17%. Because guess what? 17%, when you're talking about 17 people, yeah, it's only one or whatever, two or whatever. When you're talking about 8 billion, 17% is continents of people, right? So
Yeah.
when you think about having the same trait as a small percentage of people, but then as you look at what the numbers are, you are not an outlier if you're 12%, 15%, 17%. That's just another pattern. And this is what bugs me sometimes about the way we talk about, like, oh, that's an outlier, that's a unicorn. Like somehow Sarah J. Maas is a unicorn. Nope. There's so many thousands of writers that are wired exactly like her, and they need to use her as a model and just disappear from everything because it's
Mhm.
how they're going to write their best books. But because we think that these numbers are so tiny, like, well, it must just be me. Nope. It is millions of people that are wired that way. Like, you're not alone in it.
That's such a good point.
Yeah.
Oh, we're coming to the end of the hour, so I wanna make sure that I do the right thing and give people a way to get in touch with you. So
Oh, sure.
first,
Yeah.
go to betterfasteracademy.com, right? And then from there, they can get to your YouTube and learn more about your classes and your courses and books and everything else, right? Would
Yeah.
this be the first place you would send people?
Yeah. Yeah. It's got
Okay.
all of the resources kind of in one place. And I just want to address two questions. One that
Oh,
Fran asked just now, and then one that had been asked a little earlier, which
okay.
is, are there a set of strengths that writers have? Right? Like, is there a set of strengths that quote unquote good writers have? And it's so important to me that um, the human population is so diverse in the way our brains work. It's
Mhm.
so diverse. There are 378,000 different types of people just according to strengths. When
Mhm.
you add in Enneagram or other personality traits or anything like that, age, culture, background, things like that, gender, you're looking at millions upon millions of different types of people, right? But it's also important to acknowledge that success is not limited to type. So it's not like there's a top 5 strengths that all the successful writers have. So if I don't have those, I'm somehow out. Or that like all writers are exactly the same and we're somehow this weird, segment of humanity. Like, nope, writers are people like
Is this the
everybody are
question that you're
people.
addressing? I wanna make sure that
This was the most recent one, yeah, and then
okay,
I
okay.
saw one earlier that was about how many is there a top 5 that is most common among writers, among successful
Gotcha,
writers?
okay.
And there isn't, because the distribution of strengths in the population is so significant, like 12 to 19% is the distribution of each individual strength and how often it occurs in the top 5, because there's
Mhm.
34 of them. So there are people with all 34 strengths that
Gotcha.
are writers, artists, CEOs, business people, NBA basketball players, right? Like, there are people with each of the strengths that are everything, because it's how are you going to be successful at it? And then unfortunately, writers don't have as much in common with each other as we think we do. So a lot of things that we think are universal to all writers, and that's where we get a lot of these rules of like, don't write as you go. If it's boring to you, it'll be boring to everyone. Like all these
Yeah.
rules that we have that are just not the case, because we don't understand how diverse everyone's brains are and how unique everyone is from each other. And then that makes us feel like somehow we're wrong if we're wired differently. So yeah, it's such a complicated world, but it's worth figuring out, I think. Yeah.
Excellent.
Yeah.
Let me bring up your YouTube channel too.
Oh, great. Thank you.
Yep. For those of you who are not watching but listening to the podcast, that's www.youtube.com/@ Becca Syme. That's BECCASYME. And finally, for those of you on Instagram, you can find Becca at Instagram.com/Becca_Syme.
Yay.
I know you have to get going soon, Becca, and I so appreciate you being here.
Yeah, thank you.
Can you come back every week, you think?
I know, right?
Just hang out with us?
I do actually do live coaching on our Crowdcast also. So if anybody sees this in a recording, if you hit the first week of whatever month, you can come and find us, and we'll help however we can, whatever perspective we can offer.
Sign me up. If you like this conversation as much as I did, can you do us a favor and like the video, comment, and subscribe to Drop to Digital's YouTube channel, because it helps us get people like Becca back on the show again. And then you can go to D2D Live. That's the letter D, the number 2, the letter D, live.com. If you bookmark that page, then you can see who our guests and topics will be for subsequent weeks. And for those of you who may just be kind of checking out self-publishing for the very first time, did you know that you can sign up for a free Draft to Digital account simply by going to draft2digital.com? To all of our viewers out there,
huge fan.
Aw,
Draft to Digital rocks.
We're a huge fan of you too, Becca. The door is always open for you, so come back and see us again, please. For our viewers out there, you guys, thanks for joining us week in and week out, and welcome to the new viewers out there who are joining us maybe for the first time. Welcome. We're going to end this. Let's see. Oh, I always have to find our commercials. Like, where did I put this stuff? I'm working off a new laptop for the first time today, so I'm like, where's that thing? Here it is. So, Becca, thanks again. If you can hang out in the green room for a second, I'll meet you back there. I'm going to play our quick outro here, if I can figure out how to do it. I'm so smooth at this, I tell you.
You're doing great. You're doing great.
Work. Why aren't you working? Oh, well, we're just going to end it this way then. Good times. Bye, everybody.
Ebooks are great, but there's just something about having your words in print. Something you can hold in your hands, put on a shelf, sign for a reader. That's why we created D2D Print, a print-on-demand service that was built for you. We have free, beautiful templates to give your book a pro look, and we can even convert your ebook cover into a full wraparound cover for print. So many options for you and your books. And you can get started right now at draft2digital.com.